God surely put it on our path for a reason. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And these scumbags created the system. My name is Shahir Dowd.
It was just an accident. My name is Thomas White.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film It Was Just an Accident. That's the name of the American release of this film. A Simple Accident is the other one? Is that correct,
A Simple Accident. But it was no accident that God put us on the path to have Thomas Flight on the show, which is something that we've been meaning to do for a long time as big fans of his YouTube channel, who is also a Nebula creator. Welcome to the show, Thomas. Nice to have you. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we've been trying to get you on for a little while, and
but we're bad at scheduling.
We are terrible at scheduling.
And I've been wildly busy for a while, so yeah, I feel it.
Yeah, it has been in. I just recently watched your top 10 of the year episode, which was a great watch, by the way. And if anyone isn't following Thomas Flight at this point, then I don't know what you're doing in the video essay world at this right now. But you also announced something special in that Nebula episode, that you are working on a documentary feature for the first time, right? That will be coming out shortly about storms in North Carolina.
That's right. Yeah, I made a documentary roughly over the last year after a horrible hurricane hit Western North Carolina, where I live. So it's kind of in the tail end of post-production now. I don't know when it'll be out yet, but sometime in 2026. So that's a little nebulous, but keep your eyes peeled. It'll be out there eventually. I'm very excited to share it with everyone.
Hell yeah. I mean, you can see the finish line, at least at this point. Like, it is no longer so far ahead. Like, it's in your sights now. That's got to feel really good.
Yes. Yeah, it feels great. It's been a long journey getting to this stage. So I'm excited for the end.
As a burgeoning documentary filmmaker, I'm curious, is there any documentary filmmakers that you kind of took inspiration from while making your first?
Oh, so many. I mean, there's, I don't want to set the expectations too high and too lofty, but I really love documentaries by Wim Wenders and Werner Herzog. Those kinds of documentarians that have a very personal perspective in how they talk about a subject. And also more recently, Mstislav Chernov is a Ukrainian documentarian whose film 20 Days in Mariupol.
Miles from.
And
yeah.
Yes, 2,000 meters from Andrika is coming out this year. Very good, or it's already out now. You can watch that. Very good, but yeah, he's also been a bit of an inspiration recently.
I think I read or saw you somewhere talking about Chris Marker as well. So I wondered if Sans Soleil and Tokyo Ga from Wim Wenders kind of feels like part and parcel of what you are interested in as a documentary filmmaker, which is also kind of the antecedent to the precedent to a lot of video essay work that people are doing these days as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that very almost essayistic style of documentary. Obviously, I'm kind of drawn to that because you can sort of see the video essay as a form of documentary, in a certain light in some ways. So yeah, there's a natural sort of bleed over between, that video essay work and the documentary stuff that I've done. Although I wouldn't say this documentary is an essay. That obviously just informs kind of my approach to that kind of filmmaking.
Jumping back to, Shahir had mentioned your best of 2025 video as well. I agree with every one of them that I did see. I did not see all of them on your list. But even going beyond that, a question we do like to ask folks when they come on here, just to sort of have our audience, if they aren't already familiar with your work, get to sort of know your cinematic proclivities. So the silly question to start with that would be, what would you consider what we would call your desert island movie? The film that you could just take with you, and if that was the thing you had to watch for a very, very, very long time, what would be your pick there?
This is obviously a tough choice, and it changes probably from year to year. But right now, I think what it would be is Inherent Vice, PTA's Inherent Vice. It's not his best movie. It's not even my favorite movie. There's just something about that movie that makes it endlessly rewatchable for me. It just has a little bit of everything, and it's kind of this very mellow vibe. Anytime I'm I want to watch something, but I don't know what to put on. Somehow I keep like getting drawn back to that movie. So yeah, that's the one I would take to the desert island with me.
We haven't done that P.T. Anderson film on the podcast, but we have a friend that runs a podcast in Australia, One Heat Minute, where he does 1 minute of every film for a while, and I think he's done a series on Inherent Vice, and I am itching to kind of listen to that series because I have to admit, Inherent Vice and Licorice Pizza are the two P.T. Anderson films that I kind of find the most befuddling, and in terms of like, I don't know what I'm getting out of this. And I've watched Inherent Vice twice now, and I do agree with you. There is a kind of hypnotic quality to it. There's nothing better than Joaquin Phoenix screaming at a picture for no reason, or getting stoned and doing his hair in weird ways. But I read the Pynchon novel at the same time as I saw the film, and yeah, I just found myself kind of like not quite getting it. I rewatched it this year though, and I found that it did work better for me this time around, but I still find myself kind of like, it's not quite like The Phantom Thread for me, or it's not quite The Master, or There Will Be Blood is the one that I kind of circle back to the most of his work. But it's a really good choice. It's a fat, because I think the parameters of the Desert Island movie is like, what would you watch over and over again? It doesn't mean that you have to love it every single time.
Yeah.
But more that like, I want to grow to love this movie over time.
I'm weird where like sometimes my favorite movies, my absolute favorite movies, I don't end up watching all the time, because often they're ones that just kind of like, they're like a gut punch to watch, or just like it's like I don't want to like just be like slammed with the most sort of like profound or dark or like deep thing again and again. So sometimes it's the ones that are just kind of like, oh, this is fun and it has some depth there, but like it's also, I can rewatch it a lot because it's not like taking a bunch of mental energy every time I watch it.
Yeah, that's why I like that question, because it's not like, oh, what's your favorite movie or top 5 movies or anything like that, because that's sort of like, that's a harder and or more loaded question to answer. Whereas for the exact reasons you just laid out, like the Desert Island movie is such a fun little weird niche of like a selection of something that you enjoy and why. I don't know. I just
we did an episode, I think, very early on the podcast where it was episode 100 or 200, I can't even remember, where we did our Desert Island movies. And Matt's is a Desert Island movie, is also a movie that I watched often in my childhood, which was Masters of the Universe, which is, by the way, as we're recording this episode, a new version of Masters of the Universe will be dropping a trailer for tomorrow. But by the time you've listened to this episode, it will be out. Also, by the time you listen to this episode, the Oscar nominations will be out. So where Jafar Panahi's film, It Was Just an Accident, sits will be revealed to you probably earlier than we are having this conversation. The film I picked in that was also oddly a video essay, or the formative video essay was Orson Welles' F for Fake, was the film that I would rewatch over and over again. As a film student, was introduced to that movie around the same time as Sans Soleil. And while I've never really gravitated towards the format of making video essays, for some bizarre, I don't know what reason it is, actually, it's always befuddled me. The rewatching F for Fake is just like, I can just jump into that movie and watch it over and over and over again. And it feels like every time I watch it, I'm focused on one other area that's different to the thing that I focused on the first time. So that's kind of how we came to that question. We were actually at, I should put this video out. We were at Sundance last year, and I was wandering around Sundance asking people what their Desert Island movies were. And there's some really, really good picks that people had, but I have not put together that footage. So I should do that at some point as well.
It's almost as if we all have 7 jobs.
We all have 7 jobs and other things to do. We had a couple more questions for you. If you wanted to just kind of share your cinematic proclivities with us. But the next one was just kind of a question I was just thinking about today, which would be, which movie would Thomas Flight show to aliens to represent humanity?
The very like the serious, pretentious kind of art house answer to this is the documentary Baraka.
Of course,
I really love. Just like encapsulates actual humanity in a way that maybe like no other thing I've ever seen does. So I'd love for the aliens, I can think of no better movie that would just be like, here's what humanity is, just like offer us ourselves on a platter to the aliens. But yeah, I think the opposite end of the spectrum would be sending them something like, I don't know, Paddington 2 or something. Just be like, please like
Excellent
us. Like,
choice.
look, we can, like we have a good side. We're big softies as well. We want, we want a good impression. We don't want to send them like Apocalypse Now or something, and then they're just going to think these people are awful and then come and just like wipe us out because we're too dangerous.
That is both a excellent answer and also the one that will not get our planet eradicated and turned into a hyperspace bypass. So I think that works out quite well.
I have a strange thing here, which is that my barber is obsessed with Baraka and the Katsi trilogy, and that is what we talk about while he is giving me a haircut and trimming my beard. I love this guy, by the way. Christo at Cuts and Cloth in Astoria is the best because he truly loves cinema and he loves talking about movies with me, and I love talking about movies with him. The thought that I had in my mind there was like to give the aliens the entire Katsi trilogy, so that at least we could buy like 9 hours with them, so we could go off and do something else while they're invading. But Matt, actually, I haven't asked that question of you either. Do you have an answer for this just before we move on into...
I don't know. Jim Cotta.
There
I don't know. No, with the riff tracks burnt in.
Yeah.
And I feel as though that might really get us off at least on the right foot.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That is a totally. I'm on the other side, which is slightly more pessimistic, which is that I thought that I would give them Doctor Strangelove, which was equally funny, but also like, look, you don't need to invade us. We're going to do it ourselves anyway, and we will mess this up on our own accord. So, you're good. But, if you do have a response to what movie would you give the aliens if they were here to represent humanity, write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com with your thoughts on that. Before we jump into Jafar Panahi's new film, I'm excited for this, and I have to talk up front here about the fact that I've spent the last 3 weeks watching. I think I've watched 8 Jafar Panahi films in the last 3 weeks. I had not watched a lot of his films before this. In fact, the only thing I'd seen was his son's film, Pana Panahi's film, Hit the Road. So I don't know why. I kind of felt that I wanted to spend some time learning about who he was, given that we will be talking about, I guess, his precarious legal situation in relation to this movie in some respect. But I was also just fascinated to see the body of work that had kind of led him to where he is. And the Criterion Channel right now has a fairly large selection of his early films, along with, I guess you would categorize his work kind of breaking into 2 pieces. One before his arrest in 2011, which were kind of more traditionally narrative, although one film kind of stands out in that era, The Mirror. And then from 2011, after he was arrested and ostensibly he was placed with a 6-year arrest, which I think he served 6 months of before he was put under house arrest. And then accompanying that was a 20-year ban on filmmaking, which, of course, he has then since made 5 films during that period. Famously, the first film in 2011, possibly taking its title inspiration from René Magritte, was This Is Not a Film, which was smuggled out of Iran on a flash drive inside of a cake to the Cannes Film Festival and played there to much acclaim. And he has repeatedly made films defying the ban that he's been placed. But I can't think of any other filmmaker on the planet who has actually been banned from making films. And there are perhaps filmmakers who should be, but not for the reason that Jafar Panahi has been. So I am excited to talk about Panahi with you and with Matt as well, and kind of get our thoughts and feelings. It was just an accident. It's obviously in Oscar contention, and at the time of this recording, we don't know if it's made it all the way to the Oscar nominations, but it has.
How fun is it for you, audience? You know things that we don't.
It's a little what do you call that?
The audience is kind of like has the Cassandra syndrome with this film right now. But Matt, could you tell us what Mr. Panahi's latest film is about?
Well, I can tell you what the Internet Movie Database says that it was just an accident is about. They say it is the following. An unassuming mechanic is reminded of his time in an Iranian prison where he encounters a man he suspects to be his sadistic jailhouse captor. Panicked, he rounds up a few of his fellow ex-prisoners to confirm the man's identity. that is a pretty straightforward way of saying what this movie is. I'll give that blurb a solid 7 out of 10. So, Thomas, I'd love it if you sort of kicked it off. Here's the thing. Do we want to tell people that might not have seen your top 10 movies video before, like, where it ranks in that, if it does? Or do you want to sort of go in cold without letting them know your ranking for the year?
I mean, I think it's going to become pretty obvious pretty quickly as we're talking about this that I like this movie a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I guess spoilers for my best of 2025 if you haven't seen it. I forget where I actually ranked it. I think it's like number 4 or 3 or something on there. So yeah, I like this quite a bit. I got to see it at Cannes this past year, and it of course won the Palme d'Or there. Yeah, I've been waiting kind of anxiously to watch it again, and enjoyed watching it a second time preparing for this. So I'm rooting for it. I'm hoping, of course, it gets at least a nomination. I kind of also had not been super familiar with Panahi's work, but had always heard of his work and had been kind of interested in checking it out. And I knew I was going to Cannes and that he had a film in the festival, and so. Sort of the beginning of last year, I also did a little bit of catch up, watched The Mirror and Taxi and No Bears, and kind of, and fell in love with him as a filmmaker and was like, oh, there's this kind of, I mean, fascinating films that he makes, but also just the story of him as a filmmaker is kind of incredible. And it only has become more fascinating, his story as a filmmaker, since throughout from the release of this film until now, with everything that's going on in this film and the context surrounding it, which I'm sure we'll get into. So yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling a little bit about that, but I like this movie a lot.
Yeah, I did not do as much homework for Panahi's body of work as y'all did. I will once time allows. But yeah, I saw this movie 2 nights ago. I mean, just sort of getting my thoughts off the top, I was also kind of just blown away by it. I think when we sort of get into a little bit more plot points, I loved the beginning of this movie. The more the movie went on, I kept going back to thinking about why we saw the family in the car and the whole thing. And I obviously the title plays into it as well with that, but the real reasons from a narrative perspective that Panahi is sort of trying to get you to question everything along with these characters as they're deciding whether or not this is the actual guy that tortured them when they were imprisoned. And it's funny, I had heard about a bit of his, to say it lightly, trouble with the law. But I didn't put 2 and 2 together when I was watching this movie because I hadn't gone deep into the story at that point. And the fact that this was made, how it was made, infinitely fascinates me. I think actually, Thomas, in your top 10 video, you're like, yeah, you watch it once because it's amazing, and then you watch it again to just watch him make this movie on the sly.
Yeah. And
that to me was, I'm so looking forward to doing it again because it was impressive as hell. I love this thing as well.
As a sort of introductory film to Panahi's work, it is, it's searing, it's thrilling to watch. It's very funny. It's sort of, there's this quality about Panahi that I have come to love, and again, this is from watching all of his films, in such a sort of confined space, is that he's very mischievous. He's a very, he's got this sort of wry smile about everything he does, and a quality. And I think when I sort of talk about this film, I will be talking about it. It's sort of in context to everything that I've watched in the last 3 weeks, because I've kind of put everything together, and No Bears was the last one I actually watched just last night. So this was one I'd watched before then. And there's I actually kind of, as much as Panahi has views himself as a director and is very steeped in cinematic history. In fact, a sort of little fun detail aside about this, he is one of only 4 directors, living directors, who have won the triptych of awards at European film festivals. That is the Palme d'Or at Cannes, the Golden Bear at Berlin, and the Golden Lion at Venice. And his contemporaries that have done that have all passed away, and that is Henri-Georges Clouzot, Michelangelo Antonioni, who we did mention on our last week's episode, and Robert Altman. So he is an esteemed filmmaker, but he's also kind of wryly funny, and the quality about him that I have like really enjoyed the most, if I was thinking about him as a filmmaker, is how much he is shaping reality in front of you as an audience member. He is constantly like reshaping reality as though it was a game. And there are moments when you're watching any of his films, and again, I'm talking about like the broader context here, where it looks like something is happening off the cuff, only for you to realize that it was entirely staged. And then as the staging goes along, it kind of becomes this remarkable sort of cinematic dance where you realize that he is like staged a 6-minute take with actors walking in and out of scenes and traveling forward. And he does that in this film. There are several extended takes where you're kind of like, wow, he is really just playing this out. And in a way where you're kind of like, I don't know how much longer he can sustain it. It does feel like a little bit of a game that he's playing with the audience, and he's infinitely skilled in it in a way that I don't think I've seen any other filmmaker do in a long time. And again, the sort of additional context here is that he is still under a 20-year ban from making movies. This movie was made entirely in secret. There is a sort of process that he and his collaborators go through where they will send fake scripts, or they will work with other collaborators to say, this person is directing it, or not actually Panahi. In the film No Bears, they kind of dramatize this idea that he travels to this remote village where he is directing another film just via a laptop and an internet connection. And I think a lot of that did actually happen on this film. There's a part, they were actually infiltrated by the Iranian government at some point. Police actually stopped them, and they had a game plan to deal with that, where they handed fake cameras and empty memory cards to the police at the right moment, which is, again, something that kind of happens in No Bears as well. So there's sometimes we are wondering how he's kind of like playing with reality in sort of really profound ways, where it feels like he's a master manipulator. And going back again to the body of his work, there's sort of extraordinary moments in his career where you're kind of like, I don't know how he does this. Thomas, you mentioned the movie The Mirror. The Mirror is probably the most extraordinary film I've seen this year, without a doubt. And there is a moment in the midpoint of The Mirror which kind of shatters everything that I thought was possible about movies. And I don't want to give it away because I want everyone to have the experience that I had when I watched it, where it was like, wait a minute, that wasn't supposed to happen. Oh my God. And then the film kind of like transforms in front of your eyes in a way that makes you feel like it's happening in real time. But then only later do you realize that it's being manipulated by Panahi in sort of beautiful ways. And then another favorite thing is in the movie Taxi, he picks up a person who sells DVDs door to door. And there's a sort of wonderful quality of the fact that everyone knows who Jafar Panahi is in Iran. And there's the guy who sells DVDs, Martin Scorsese, commented about this as well in a stand-up with him, was like, Mr. Panahi, I know who you are. Because Panahi is driving a taxi, pretending that he's not being a filmmaker, but actually making a film about being a taxi driver and starring himself. So all of that, I just kind of wanted to lay out the table here in terms of like what I'd been watching and how I kind of got to It Was Just an Accident. It's interesting that It Was Just an Accident seems to be his most acclaimed, at least in the West at this point right now. And it is kind of the most straight down the line film that he has made in a while. But again, when you learn that sort of additional context, it is kind of profoundly beautiful. I was also a little bit hesitant about it, thinking, because a film I love, despite the sort of hesitation about recommending the filmmaker, is Roman Polanski's film Death and the Maiden, which this film bears many resemblances to. And it was only today when I was reading Roxana Hadidi's discussion with Panahi that I realized that I learned that Panahi had actually written an adaptation of the original Death of the Maiden play, and that was supposed to happen before he got arrested. And then as he got arrested and he was trying to figure out what to do, it transformed into this other film. It was just an accident, which also reflected his time in Even prison while he was there, and reflects a lot of the stories that he picked up on along the way. All of that to say, I really, really, really love this film. I think it is oddly his most easily accessible and easy to watch, but it kind of demonstrates like the depth of cinematic knowledge he has, but also his ability to like engage with an audience in a way that is like playful and fun and mischievous. So I really, really enjoyed this film. I think it was a nice punctuation mark to a lot of the work that I'd seen throughout the last 3 weeks of his movies. We could probably get into spoilers here, but I wondered if Thomas, like when you had been watching any of his other movies, that sort of sense of how this film feeds into his larger body of work.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought up The Mirror, because I also watched that for the first time last year and was just blown away and absolutely love that and think more people need to see it. And that's the one I'd recommend. Like, if you want to just go back and like start with a genuinely great, amazing film that's like early in his career, before he was sort of like making these subversive movies illegally after he was banned, that's a good one to go to. And then yeah, he kind of had to shift gear. He was already playing with cinema in a very interesting way. The Mirror has this like documentarian element to it where it's very anthropological, and there's this sense that yes, he's making a movie with a story, but he's also capturing this like portrait of Tehran and the people there and trying to do that in a very authentic way. And that's ultimately, that movie and a few others are ultimately what get him banned from making movies, which it seems kind of incredible to us, I think, because you watch something like The Mirror and it doesn't seem scandalous. It doesn't seem on the face super politically provocative or anything like that, but it's just like, even the very nature of sort of just documenting reality in a straightforward way, it was considered, not appropriate or illegal, enough for him to get banned. And then he kind of shifts gears into doing stuff that's very meta. He's obviously trying to kind of figure out the process of what does it look like to film in secret, and what are the different ways you can do that, and what kind of stories can you tell. And this movie really, to me, feels like a culmination of like figuring that process out and figuring out how to tell stories with it. And it also has a lot of punch behind it, because while the other movies that he's making are very personal and based on his own experience, this one's like coming out of the experience of being in prison and kind of directly pulling from some of those like experiences and stories. And so it just has a very like visceral quality to it, and it just works incredibly well, I think, as a thriller. Like you were saying, it is his most accessible movie, at least recently. And I think a lot of that is just like, I think about there's like a Hitchcock quote about like suspense being like, there's a bomb under the table and you show the bomb and two people are talking, and then you're like, when is the bomb going to go off? And you literally from like the beginning of this movie, you just have this bomb sitting in this van, which is this guy that they capture and they're driving around with, and you're like, they've got to do something with this guy at some point. And it's just, the entire movie is like this suspense, slow burn. And then that's kind of what sustains the like thriller interest of the film. And then that allows him to just kind of like spend most of the movie actually having these different characters that are kind of representatives of different ways of thinking about like, how do we react as citizens who are kind of under the heel of this authoritarian regime, who are experiencing injustice at the hands of this regime. How do we respond to that? And so you have all these different characters that are kind of responding to it in different ways. And you just like, the movie is basically a conversation about that. These different characters having a conversation about what do we do? And And it's the crazy thing about it, I think that was really hitting home for me watching it again tonight, was that conversation is not hypothetical. It's not a hypothetical conversation. It's a very literal conversation that they're having about the political landscape of what's going on in their country. And that it's so alive with that. Like I think we've spent so much time talking about the context of the film rather than the film itself, because it's like literally it's impossible to like separate this movie from the context in which it's being made and how it's being made and all of those things. Like they're so kind of integral to each other.
The context is the text.
Yes.
Which is a very interesting sort of like, you don't see that, and when you do, it's not normally this effective. Like normally when there's no like subtext or the context isn't all there, we're like, oh well, that's very simple, and like, yes, they're saying the thing. But here, saying the thing is the point, and it's being done incredibly skillfully and crafted with such meaning that it's like, it was honestly a breath of fresh air. This movie reminded me, actually, I will spoil what this movie reminded me a little bit of when I was watching it with my 3-word review of this movie, which is Iranian guerrilla Anora.
Okay.
Because I kept thinking, and again, this is, I think, a more effective for what it is going for. And I loved Anora. There's no slight to Anora, but like, and maybe it's driving around in a van trying to figure out what to do about a person. That could be sort of the tie-in
it's
to it.
also a
but
clown
like,
car that keeps filling up with more people and with more escalating like scenarios, like involving drugs and like what does his leg smell like, or what does he like what does his leg feel like? This is sort of escalating scenarios. Yeah.
Well, the thing I liked, going back to the context being the text, the thing I really liked was also the movie. It's interesting. The movie never preaches what way it wants the audience to kind of lean. I found every character that's in the van. Vahid is the main character. But then it was the bride and the groom, and then I'm trying to remember the dude's name who was like the sort of loose cannon, because the woman was Shiva.
Hamid. And then Shiva was the photographer.
Yeah. Hamid, like, he was obviously like on edge, tweaked to 11, but you couldn't argue, like, the characters were all arguing like, oh, well, this is okay, or this isn't okay, or we should do this, or we shouldn't do this. But never did I feel like when I was watching it that the filmmaker behind it was like actually trying to tell us like, no, what is the right or the wrong thing to do here? These are all characters with valid ways of why they are thinking. And even though they might be calm or they might be freaking out, like, it left the moral quandary to the audience who's in this clown car with all these characters to sort of figure out. And that was, again, another refreshing moment in something where you don't normally get that when the context is the text. Yeah. Normally it's like, well, they think it's this, and don't do this or don't do that. And this was just so lovingly crafted to be like, here's all the options. Mm-hmm. I mean, they might as well have turned to the camera and made a very terrible cinematic mistake and said, so what do you think? Because
I wouldn't put it past them. I really wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't put it past him for him to like stop the movie midway and appear as a character and start talking to the audience.
A la Gremlins 2, he's Hulk Hogan in the theater and he just turns around. Yeah.
Thomas, I really like the thing that you said, which is that there is no metaphor here, which is that, and the reason I say that is that as we're discussing this film, there is an ongoing protest that began some 2 weeks ago that has led to an almost entire media blackout of Iran at this particular moment. And reports today said that there are approximately 4,000 people dead as a result of it. So this is not a hypothetical. This is not a situation where you're extrapolating an idea to its worst possible iteration. Since the revolution of 1979 and the several events that have led up to it, even as recently as 2022, when there was the death of a young woman who was beaten in captivity because of not wearing a hijab correctly, which led to a month-long protest called the Women Life Freedom Protest. This is not a hypothetical, and sort of just a metatextual thing about that is the Mayram Ashfari, who plays Shiva, was arrested during that Women Life Freedom protest and beaten by police. So this idea of this actress, playing someone who is confronting their own captor in this moment has significant weight to it. But just like we'd kind of highlighted before, Panahi is too smart to make this searing or seething in any way against the regime. And perhaps he's maybe learned his lesson, or maybe he's being cautious about how he does this, because as of also discussing this, he has been sentenced again to fulfill more prison time. So the question mark about whether, if he wins an Oscar and returns to Iran, will he be sent to prison right away, is, again, not a hypothetical. It is an actual threat that is looming over his head. And it seems absurd to us because he is currently touring the United States on a sort of extended press tour where he is staying in beautiful hotels and he's being put up by Neon to talk about this film that ostensibly will get him arrested once he lands back in Iran. I think those qualities all, still, I feel like I'm still discussing the context. Within the internal logic of the film itself, the performances and the story of Iqbal, this prison guard, Peg Leg, is really profoundly affecting in terms of, like, Matt, you sort of highlighted the early structure of the film, which is that we start with this character's family, and we see them, hit a dog in the middle of the night, and we see the guilt that has on him because it was just an accident, and we see that he has a child and a pregnant wife, and so that guilt, kind of plagues us throughout the entirety of the film. And as these characters are trying to navigate, is Iqbal Peg Leg, which is like really the sort of central mystery of the movie, we are kind of wondering about, like, those external factors to this prisoner, who was formerly an interrogator, which again, references back to Death and the Maiden. But I want to pull up this quote from Roxana Hadidi's discussion with Panahi, where he said this thing, and he said this in an interview with Variety as well, and I think he might have said this in the same conversation he had with Scorsese. But he said another filmmaker, Mahmoudin, was reminded when he was watching the film, was reminded one day in Even prison is the name of the prison that Panahi was imprisoned in. Israel had just bombed Iran, sparking a nearly 2-week war during which 1,200 Iranians and 31 Israelis were killed. The worst single attack was on the Even prison where they were stationed, and about 80 people, including prisoners and employees, were killed in what human rights organizations have called a war crime. It happened at a time when we all had the concept of nonviolent resistance in mind, Mohammed says, which is why, even as their lives were at risk, they pulled many of their captors out of the debris. We saved their lives, Mohammedian recalls. Some of us even treated their wounds, gave them drinks. Not everyone was like this, he continues. Some of people chose not to help the interrogators. Some thought about escaping. The same applied to the interrogators themselves. Once the one group expressed appreciation, while another, the very people who we had just gotten out of the rubble, whose wounds we had treated, stood up and opened fire on us as soon as they got help. And so you have this, like, amazing sense of conflict here, and I think what Panahi is really interested in is the tapestry of what makes up Iran, and he has been working in a time since the revolution of 1979 where he's been able to see Iran transform, and he is constantly questioning through this film and through many others. The other film I sort of think about in this context is a movie he made called Offside, which is about 4 young women, or actually more than 4 women, who there is a World Cup soccer game between Bahrain and Iran going on, and the women cannot attend the game, and so they are like being captured outside the game. And I think he's sort of asking the question through that movie is like, what is the society that we as Iranians are building at this point? And he's not, as I say, searing or seething or angry about it, although there is a palpable sense of, like, injustice to this film. It's more of a kind of questioning to it. And the sort of moral openness of this film is a question mark to like, how do we deal with the fact that the people who are our captors are also Iranians just like us, and they have children, and those children live in our society, and they have mothers, and they are subject to the same harshness of the administration that we are. And I think, not to sort of make it everything US centric at some point, I think that's a really interesting question to ask ourselves as we kind of see, again, not to make it too political here, but an administration that's really willing to like pit people against each other. And how do we kind of respond to that as human beings? And so maybe that question I kind of asked in the beginning about like, which films would you show aliens as humanity? There's a kind of sense to this of like, what is humanity in this kind of scenario? Because the sort of governing political ideology around which these people actually live is forcing them to be against each other when there is kind of like a loose sense that they don't need to be. And I think that's what's sort of really fascinating about, the scene that I found most affecting was when they're in the desert, and it is a long 6 or 7 minute take of them just, Hadid arguing with Shiva, with the bride and groom about like what it is that has been done to us and what justice can we enact back on it. And, the other characters kind of like pondering back is like, look, we might be able to enact justice back, but should we? Does that make us, any better than them? And I think, again, this movie has got such a sort of rich tapestry to it that it's such a sort of like beautiful kind of construction of Iranian society. And again, this comes back to this thing about Panahi, which is that he's so good at like reshaping reality in front of you, and he makes it look effortless and, like kind of in a way that makes you think, I don't know if he's actually just putting up a camera in front of people and getting them just to like do whatever they want to do, until you kind of realize that there is like a sort of grand design to what he's doing. I rambled a little bit there, but I was just sort of like struck by the fact that, this is a dangerous movie for him to make, and yet is also subtle, which is kind of an odd contradiction about it.
Yeah, I think on top of that, one of the things that he does so astoundingly well throughout his filmography that really is showcased here is his ability to humanize, his like constant insistence on humanizing the people he's depicting in his films. And we see that. We already talked a little bit about the opening, and there's also kind of the midpoint break in the film where they kind of were getting into deeper spoiler territory here, I guess.
Yeah, which is totally fine.
Where they kind of get to the point where they really talk it out, and we almost feel like, oh, they're about to maybe just like do him in and kill, I think, I have watching it, you kind of have this feeling of like they're weighing both sides of the option. They're like, it feels like they would be justified in taking their revenge on this guy. He's if he is who they say he is, which he, it seems very likely that he is. He seemed very certain that he is. It seems like it would be hard to like be that upset with them for just, burying this guy out there in the desert. But, they're having this like debate, and the core of that debate is like the tension that runs through this film, which is a tension that faces like everyone who's ever kind of thought about or tried to or been in a position of wanting to resist injustice or oppression or anything like that, which is like, what is the best approach to that? What is justified? How do we go about this? Like, a lot of times violence feels justified and seems and maybe is potentially even at times justified in resisting violence that's being directed towards you. But then there's also this question of like, at what point, if you're willing to engage in violence, do you become the thing that you're trying to fight against or resist? At what point, by, putting violent energy into the world, do you create more of that, more conflict, instead of like bringing about peace? And anyway, so they're having this debate. That's the tension. And they almost get to the point where it's about to boil over, and you think they're going to, and then we have the second break, and it's like, okay, the daughter's in crisis, the mother's maybe in danger, and we go on this whole tangent to like, oh, we're saving the family. And it just like brings you back to this reality of like, the first time I watched it, and even the second time, I was like, I was like ready to like root for them to just do this guy in, and then you're reminded, you're like, oh yeah, but he is a dad and he does that, and it kind of like brings reality crashing back on you. And I love that move. It's like, it's brilliant, and he just like reminds us of the humanity of all these people and who they are. And he also really lets that shine through in the individual characters, where like we see the complexity of who they are. They're not just, representatives or avatars of different like philosophical stances or political factions or whatever. They feel like complicated human beings who believe what they believe, or want to take the approach they're taking for reasons that are personal to them. And I find that impulse incredibly beautiful, and I don't want to skip to the end, so maybe we'll come back to that. But I think that for me is like what's at the core of the ending too, is like the question about okay, we're going to humanize this guy. We treat him like a human, but then is that going to cost me? Am I going to end up paying the price for doing that? Like, what do you sacrifice?
And does that even matter?
Yes.
Is the ideal more important, right? Like, the thing I really liked, again, and how complex these characters come off on the screen and in the story, is when they're helping his wife and the daughter go to the hospital and have his son be born. At no point did I think that interaction for any of the characters, I didn't lean my opinion of, oh, they're going to kill this guy or they're going to not kill this guy off that. Right. What I took it as, especially from those things, was like certain characters like, no, we help. We're good people. Like this has fallen in our lap, and now we're going on a side quest. It doesn't matter that it's this guy's family. And some characters react a little bit differently than others, obviously, to give us the different viewpoints and whatnot. But then when we're done with that side quest and he's tied to the tree or whatever, I would like, in no way was I ever like, oh, he's safe now because they helped the family. Like that never. And I love that because that does speak to that specific ideology of like, well, look, everything is a gray area. We're talking about violence. Is violence justified in a thing? Well, no, except when it is, but it's not. Like, it's all dependent on your own personal moral code and what we think is constructive with society. But also, like, another movie that I'm sure we're gonna be talking about this podcast that I literally just watched today, but it's all like the methodologies of certain things tie in is All That's Left of You. Thomas, I don't know if you've seen that film yet, no. but essentially, I'm not going to say anything about it, but there's the question of, even if you have a moral thing that you want to do, will that come back and not only bite you, but like if it's to someone, a guard or a prison warden or someone who tortures people, will you helping them or not killing them, whatever version of this, cause 30 more people to be tortured? Like that level of like thought about like, well, what is the right thing, either morally or numerically or anything? And this movie has you on the knife's edge the entire time, even after they rescue the dude's family.
And the detail I love here, I think coming back to both of your points here, is that it's not schematic. There's not a sense that this was like structured to create a schematic argument. Like Vahid actually has to like negotiate how to pay for a pregnancy at a hospital for this, because of the sort of absurd system that they have in place, which is that the nurse won't, take the pregnant mother in until someone's paid for it. And he's kind of having to actually negotiate like just the general workings of a culture that as it exists in Iran. And so there's very funny parts to this as well, like the fact that everybody wants a tip for what they do. Like everyone is willing to take that tip on a card machine, and then Vahid is constantly having to like pull out his card. And I want to say this again. Hopefully, people have watched the movie at this point, but just the fact that like at some point they have to pool together, like I think it's like 60 tomans each or something like that, in order to put together the fee to pay for the hospital visit of the person that they have tied up inside the back of their car. And then at the same time, the nurse comes out and says, by the way, unless you want to, put bad luck on this, it's customary to kind of like give us something. Like Vahid then goes to a bakery or to a sweet shop and comes back with a box of sweets that he has to give to the nurses so that bad luck won't happen to this baby whom he has just saved, who happens to be the child of the person he wants to kill. And, there's this sort of like complex layer of things that he's having to deal with. And there's another sequence where they're waiting in a car to try and find out some additional information about, whether Iqbal is actually pig leg or not. And they come back and someone is performing a dance in front of their van. And they're like, oh, we have to give them a tip in order to get out of this situation as this. So it's constantly escalating, but he's like, again, this is that thing about Panahi where I'm like, is he just playing with, he just shapes reality in front of you in really strange ways where you're like, I don't know if those people just kind of turned up in front of the van as they were filming it. Cause again, remembering it, that he's filming this remotely where, and these guys are filming the entire film in secret, or if that's just something that happened and he's decided to include it in the movie. I tend to believe that he is a master manipulator in the best way that all filmmakers can be. And that he is willing to throw all of these things into the mix because he thinks that it is more interesting to do this other than being schematic about it. There's a sort of quality to this where, I think about film that's sort of like this in a way is, Quentin Tarantino's film, The Hateful Eight, which has a schematic quality to who is the villain in this room right now and how we're going to go through each of these people. But in this, again, Vahid has to it's not metaphorical. If you have someone going into labor, you're going to have to pay before they can be taken in. And you have to get sweets in order to look after them once the baby is born. And now in some way, I imagine Vahid in his head is maybe making the calculation, if I kill Iqbal in this moment, am I responsible for his kid now? I think that would be kind of part of the equation that these characters are sort of thinking about. And Shiva, the Mariam Ashfari character, is kind of interesting in this way because she is, to begin with, someone who doesn't want to take part in this. But as the film kind of continues its way through, she eventually becomes the person who enacts kind of or manages to get Iqbal to kind of confess to the things that he's done. And once we realize the things that he's done as well, it puts into context everything that's happened here and why these people have been driving around with him in locked up in this car, which is that, Iqbal, if he is the person, and I think by the end of the film, we are convinced that he is, has not just tortured these people, but taken joy in his ability to humiliate them, and destroy their lives in ways that, they will never profoundly ever come back from. And, Shiva is the one who kind of has a moment where she is able to sort of draw that out of him and get him to respond. And it has, again, in this sort of beautiful contextual way, has to do with the fact that Iqbal is also now confronting the reality that he's just had a son. And in Iranian culture as well, again, this is bring back some context for the opening of the movie The Circle, which I also watched this week. There's a moment in The Circle where an older woman is at a hospital and she realizes her daughter has just given birth to a daughter, her granddaughter, and all she cares about is the fact that her family will be disappointed that she didn't birth a son. And, this will be not shameful, but bad for the family that her daughter wasn't able to deliver a son. So we're living in a patriarchal society that doesn't really respect women. And so this man has just had a son, which for an Iranian man would be kind of the best thing that could happen to him on the worst possible night. And they use this to kind of enact this confession out of him. So it's just, again, I feel like I sort of I get excited and then exasperated by how much this movie is actually doing. Because on the surface, it actually just plays like a straight thriller. And it's got one of the great sort of thriller style endings, where, Vahid is kind of just standing there and he hears the sound of pig leg again. And we don't know how he's going to respond. And we don't know how much fear is in his face. We're watching the back of his head. And it's that ambiguity that kind of really, really just beautifully works in this movie, which is there is a sense of injustice to this world, but like, what can we do about it? And I don't think he has an answer to that, but I think about it, the fact that he's going to go back to Iran having made a really beautiful film about these issues and probably be locked up for it. Like it's such a wild thing to think about. Because again, in America, we can just sort of as a side, as a filmmaker, I was like, I'm always complaining about how hard it is to make films. And, this is literally a man who like has been banned from making movies and made a movie immediately once that happened, and made a brilliant movie once that happened, and then made 4 more of them.
So the band's really working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the ending is so Thomas, a long-standing tradition on this show is that I tend to rally against the ambiguous ending in general.
Yes.
It's not something I vibe with. I just oftentimes get more angry that I feel like the story has not concluded, and now I can make my own decision.
You were mad after No Country for Old Men. You were like,
yeah, a little.
Oh my God, you have to go back to listen to any of our Yagos Lanthimos episodes.
Oh God, don't do it. Don't do that to yourself. But I gotta say, I think because of all the things we've talked about over this near hour, I don't consider this ending ambiguous. Like, you could read it a couple different ways, sure, but I think every way you read it, because of the sound design of the leg walking up and then like you hear the creaking of the artificial leg, and then it sort of leaving right before it cuts to black and there's credits. Every way you can take that is still, like, in my opinion, and again, there's different reads of it. I think it had an intentionality to what it wanted you to. It kind of got to have its cake and eat it too, right? Because you get to have that moment where you leave the theater and you talk to people and you're like, holy shit, what the hell? But it doesn't feel like, I guess I'm going with the cake analogy of empty calories. It doesn't feel like empty calories because, like, it's not leaving like, well, what happened? Because the point isn't exactly what happened. It's there is either, even though it could read it a bunch of different ways, he's either right there and he's leaving, or he's still traumatized by it and he's actually not there, or he's there and he leaves, but that's more of a threat and not like everything's hunky dory. But either way, it's going through almost every possibility of what the characters were literally debating the entire film of what and why. And it encapsulates every one of them, and you can just shift your perspective and it makes total sense. And I fucking loved it. It was the ending of this movie. I was shocked at the end of it when I was like, I loved it.
Well, I think part of why the ambiguity works so well here, which, to be fair, I like ambiguity in a lot of other places, but it is something special here, I think, because it doesn't feel cheap, because it captures a truth that is at the core of this story and that exists in the context of this situation in this film, because it's like, this is an unresolved question. Like, in a way, the ending of this film is almost kind of still up in the air and waiting to be resolved by, if you want to read it in a certain metaphorical light, like Panahi going back to Iran and what happens next. It's like, he makes this film, he goes to prison, he makes a film in response to prison that's about like, hey, look, you did these awful things to me, you are oppressing these people in my country, but also I'm going to choose to see the humanity in you, and I'm going to choose nonviolence as a I see that a little bit. I think he's representing a plurality of views here, but I see that energy in this film, and I'm going to put that out there, and I'm going to be like, he's not trying to hide, in a sense. Like, he could try to run away, but he's said, like, I'm going to go back, and he's going to go back, and he's kind of like, yeah, this movie exists within the context of that open question of like, what does it look like to sort of look your captor in the face and call them out for the horrible things they've done, and then like show your face while you're doing it and give them the freedom to come back and arrest you again if that's what they want to do. It's like taking the high road in like such an unbelievable way that like I admire so much. And I'm like, I just hope, like, the scary thing is watching what's been happening there in the recent weeks is like there's like truly kind of a horrifying ambiguity there where it's like you really don't know. Like, he might just immediately get thrown back in prison. I would hope at this point that his life won't be in danger, but like it's hard to feel like there's not that's not out of the question. So anyway, that ambiguity is so real.
I think there's also even in the ambiguity, there's a practical quality to the ending that he's putting here, which is that Vahid has kind of, in a way, done to the interrogator what the interrogator did to them, which is that he was blindfolded the entire time. And there might be a question mark in Vahid's mind, which is that, can he smell me? Can he recognize me through these other traits? Because those are the qualities.
Is he Wolverine?
Well, those are the qualities those are the aspects that I use to identify him. And now I am going to walk around with that same question mark over my head, which is that will Iqbal be able to identify me through smell, through touch, through, like the sound of my car, through whatever? There's a practical quality to like that fear that he has at the end. And that fear is essentially kind of flipping the moral question on its head that they've been asking this whole time, which is that now that we have sort of gone down this path, we didn't, I think at some point in this film, he says it would have been better to kill us, because what they did was they humiliated us in a way that we will never be able to change, never be able to forget. And, that question of what they did to Iqbal will kind of come back to them as well. And I think there's a sort of beautiful circularity to it. And then the title of the film and the kind of opening of it, when they hit a dog and Iqbal's wife says, God must have sent that dog to us, journeyed it all its way into, in front of our car at this particular moment. It was just an accident, but that is the journey of this dog. And, I wonder about that journey of that dog led Vahid, led Iqbal to walk into Vahid's store at that particular moment. And what sort of strange turns will the world kind of do for these characters? Like, at some point will Vahid meet Iqbal's son and, be reminded of the fact that he was there helping his birth, and I sort of bring this back to something that happens in No Bears. And then, I'm also thinking about the conversation that Panahi had with Scorsese, which is that I get the impression, though he comes out of a secularist Islamic state, he's probably not that religious. And, he said so much that cinema is his religion, which is something I've said on this podcast before. And he talks about the idea that, like, for him, cinema is the way he expresses his truth, and cinema is the way that stories are,
perfect and powerful.
Yeah.
Somehow it feels good, the heartbreak in a place like this.
It feels good in a place. That's really what we should have happen here. Is Panahi should direct the next AMC commercial.
Yeah.
And if he does,
yes,
I'm okay with him going to prison for that.
Oh, wow.
Whoever did that. And he talks about that. And like in the film No Bears, there's a moment where he is called upon by village elders to confess what he has done to God in a special prayer room or a room like Thomas. You saw No Bears as well, right? But instead he opts to he's like, well, look, I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I would like to do is to confess to the camera and to express myself through the camera. And I think that's this sort of like thing about him, which is that, morality finds its way through storytelling for him. And like, it's more profoundly affecting than religion or any other sort of philosophy or anything like that. And I guess I'm reminded a little bit of an Iranian friend that I had back in New Zealand, who said this to me, was like, and I think it came out of the tradition of the fact that he's Iranian, and in Iran, people like Abbas Kiarostami, Kiarostami and, Asghar Farhadi. These are like public intellectuals. Jafar Panahi is a public intellectual. They're not commercial filmmakers, or, they're sort of treated as my friend Ahmed would say, like filmmakers are akin to philosophers and poets. They have a truth that they want to tell about the world, and that's what they strive towards. I think that's why this movie kind of has a pure heart to it, and a pure sort of like a purity to it that is also informed by the fact that, he's a student of Hitchcock, and is not, is so capable of making something that is like really thrilling. The other reason I watched 8 or 9 of his movies this week, by the way, they're all an hour and a half long. Like they're all like, you can just take these in very easily every evening, like it's an hour and a half of your time. And he doesn't make these long standing things. These are like short, sharp, to the point, well told stories that he's been doing for the last, 20 years now. More than that, actually. And I'm so blown away by having taken in the breadth of his work in the last few weeks. And I'm excited for people to watch this movie.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we all liked it.
Yeah, that seems safe.
Any last thoughts, Thomas? One final thing about It Was Just an Accident. What would that be?
People should watch it. I don't know what else. I don't know what else I would add at this point. I think going back to one tiny detail, you were talking earlier about whether or not the band outside the van that they pay was like, maybe that just happened. Maybe it was staged. We don't know. The other little thing that I wanted to mention that was like that was the van runs out of gas at one point, and they're shooting like very obviously secretly from the top of a building. There's this shot of like pushing the van down the road, and there's these other people that are like running up from the street to like help them push the van. And I'm just like, what? Like, was that scripted? Because the people in the street don't know that they're making a film because they're doing it secretly. Like, are those people running up just like people who are coming along from the streets to like help them push this van? I love.
Or they hired extras to do that shot like that specific way.
Planned?
Like, we don't know.
Either way, it's like, if it's unscripted, it's such a great little like portrait of the reality of that place. If it's scripted, it's like a beautiful attention to detail in the storytelling. And it's so beautiful. Like there's little things like that. And there's such an interesting perspective to this film, all the way it's shot through a lot of car windows and all of that stuff. I love so much. There's so many things to like, and talking about it now, I already liked it, but this is one of those movies where like having this conversation just like only deepened my appreciation for like how brilliant this movie is. So hopefully it did for the viewer too. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you have seen it, watch it again. I don't know. And I hope it's nominated. If it's not, I'm gonna rebel and like.
Imagine we're talking about this, and this was the last hurrah of the film, and we never see it from it again.
It would be crazy if it wasn't nominated. Listeners, already. You're screaming into your phones right now. We can't hear you. We're not on that call. Anyway, this has been the only podcast about the film It Was Just an Accident. Thomas, thank you very much for coming on and chatting with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I'm glad this was the movie I got to come on and talk about. And I'm glad I got to talk about it on this podcast because there are going to be no others, obviously.
There's no other ones. Well, within that vein, where can folks find you on the internet?
People can find my videos, not a podcast, but videos about film.
Of course.
We talked about my best of 2025 list, which you can find on my YouTube channel, Thomas Flight. I also write about film on my newsletter, Seeing Through Film. Once my documentary is out, I'll update people about it in both places. So
yes,
go find me. I'm always talking about movies.
Hell yeah. Shahir, when you are not going around a city that will arrest you for making a movie and then making a movie anyway, where can folks find you?
You can find me criminally creating cinema at my website, suvanova.com. That's SUVANOVA. Matt, when you are currently locking people up in the back of your car and driving them around the city in the hopes of enacting some kind of vicious revenge, probably for a video game, where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me just really being mad at the third person in my Night Rain game over at my websites, Extra History and Extra Credits on the YouTube Machine and Nebula. I believe at this point, when this comes out, we will have just released our Building Angkor Wat Extra History Complete series, and then perhaps Tyrants 2, where we're doing an anthology on Tyrants, Thomas, and we have released one on Leopold II, a true nightmarish monster of a human being. And next, we're doing one on Herod the Great, subtitled "Dude Literally Tried to Kill," not literally, "Dude Tried to Kill Jesus." Check out all those things. Shir, you had that one more thing?
Well, Thomas, I watched the video of yours today, and I was just tickled by this whole thing because you and I seem to have picked up on exactly the same moment from The Exorcist for two very different reasons. But you have a video out called "Movies Aren't Just Not Built the Same as They Used to Be."
Why
sorry if I'm butchering the
movies
title.
will never feel the same. Yes.
Why movies will never feel the same. And you open that with a clip from The Exorcist, and I love this clip, where the father, I think father of the Harry, I believe his name is, I've forgotten his name, but is wandering around his apartment, or his mother's apartment, and you sort of highlight it as a sort of unusual moment because it's an unusually quiet moment in one of the biggest blockbusters of that year, which was a movie that designed to thrill and excite you. A few years earlier, I rewatched The Exorcist, and I picked up that exact same scene and I clipped it out with a sort of excited quality, because in that scene, where he's walking around the house, I don't know if you heard this, but there's a radio ad being played in the background of that scene. And in that radio ad happens to be for the Astoria World Manor, which is an event hall, and it's in Greek. And so I clipped out that clip and I enhanced it like 7 times over. And we live in Astoria, which is a Greek community. And I sent it to the Greek, the local Greek community. And I sent it to the Astoria World Manor as well, as an example of it actually happened to have an artifact from the 1970s, enjoying the fact that you picked it up for like a legitimately good cinematic reason. And I picked it up for the fact that it mentioned somewhere that I live. So, of all things, it was that particular moment, which is interesting and fascinating, perhaps why I actually quite like your videos, which is that there's this essentially oddly quiet moment in the middle of a blockbuster. It's the sort of same thing with Jaws, which is like the best moment in Jaws is when they're on the boat and they're talking about their old wounds. There are these sort of like beautiful, quiet moments that we don't get more of these days, where people kind of talk. And Matt, you will have the sort of example for you would be in Avengers Age of Ultron, when they're kind of just hanging out. That's the quality that we're kind of looking for these days.
Sure, yeah.
That's the moment, right?
Yeah, I guess. I was going to say, I think it's, you can't expect to have these deep, meaningful Age of Ultron moments in cinema anymore, because we're all on our phones at the same time, and we need the plot told to us in those quiet moments 4 times between explosions. Otherwise, we're not going to know what's happening.
Go see The Rip this weekend.
Yeah, that's the real. I just want to say I love that. I love that you found that little radio ad. I love those details. I also just want to say, Shahir, if you're the guy illegally making films, and if you're the guy driving around with the prisoner in the back of his van, I'm the guy who's taking bribes on a card reader on the top of a parking garage.
Yes!
So.
We all have our roles to play.
I wonder if you can do Patreon on a card reader. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's get that going.
Join my Patreon.
Thomas, thank you again for coming on. Yeah, everyone, we'll talk at you next week. Until then, watch this movie again.
Next week's movie, by the way, is All That's Left of You.
Oh, yeah. That's it. That's what we're doing. So go see that one, too.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.